DNA is a little bit different, and these differences in the DNA are responsible for the differences in you and me. Now, as you might have heard a couple of years ago, for the first time in the history, this DNA of humans was decoded. Cost a lot of money, took a lot of time, but in the last couple of years, these techniques to decode DNA have become incredibly much faster and awful lot cheaper. And the expectation is that in a couple of years, decoding your personal, your private DNA is going to cost, say, $1,000. Now, there's lots of really interesting things about this. Advantages of knowing your DNA sequences are manifold. There's very practical ones, that if you get a disease, knowing your DNA sequence will help in devising the absolute perfect strategy to cure you again, better than without this knowledge. Right? So you will have personalized medicine that is really specifically tailored to your physiology, which is encoded on your DNA. Now, the other thing that is laying in there is you have inherited your DNA from your parents, which inherited DNA from their parents, and so you are still made of DNA combinations of your grandparents. In fact, the DNA you're made of is a combination of all your grandparents. So rather than researching all the books that some people like to do and find out who is your grandfather and who is your great-grandfather, it is actually absolutely written in your DNA. So in where you come from, who are your grandparents, is in your DNA, which for a lot of people is really quite an interesting piece of information. So the other thing is laying in there is whether you and your potential mate are well suited. Just the fact that your genes are ready there to make healthy and beautiful children is encoded in your DNA. Might be a good thing to know. And last but not least, all of you have taken in these glossy magazines these little 10 questions that says something about your character. Are you a good sharer or are you a nice person? In fact, many of these characteristics of you and me that makes us unique individuals are encoded on your DNA. So rather than doing the silly test, you can actually go through your DNA and say, yeah, I'm indeed a very sharing person, and so on. So lots of good stuff comes from that. So the first question really is, if it becomes cheap, something that won't hurt you much, would any of you want to sequence their DNA? So who would like to do that? Raise your hand. Who would not? And who doesn't know? With these good things, there's always a flip side of these coins. Right? This personalized medicine, for example, if you have your DNA sequenced, in that information will also be whether you're going to be susceptible for cancer, susceptible for other diseases, whether it's almost certain that you'll die in your mid-40s from some horrible genetic disease. Also that is encoded in your DNA. The other thing is that, so if you do partner matching, it can very easily happen that it would appear that you and your partner have an extremely high chance of getting babies that are not looking as well as you would hope for. It can also very easily appear that the man you think is your grandfather is actually not your grandfather, but it's somebody else. And don't underestimate this. There's been lots of studies that lots of people are actually not conceived by the man they think is their father. With your DNA sequence comes also relatively much better measurement of your life expectancy. That means that, for example, who has access to this data is really the crucial point. Right? You are who you are, and whether you're going to die early or not, you can't really do much about it. But what can happen in this environment is, would you want your health insurance company to know this information with the knowledge that you might run into some early horrible disease and thereby double or triple the rate of your insurance premium? Would you want the government to know that you are prone to violence, as it's written in your DNA? Would you want the police to know this information? Would you like to have your life insurance company have a much better indicator of the life expectancy of you and me? the real critical point in the end is who gets access to your personal DNA information. Now you should realize that, especially the youngsters under you, it is very, very likely that your DNA is going to be sequenced. This DNA sequence is going to enter this whole environment through the back door. Some of you is going to go to a hospital with a cancer, and to devise the optimal treatment of this cancer, they're going to find out what the molecular mistakes are in some tissue that causes this cancer. And to find out these molecular mistakes, they're going to sequence the DNA of this cancer, but not only find what the mistakes are in this cancer, but also all the rest of the information that makes you you. So the interesting thing, of course, is with all these things is that the technological development is far, far ahead of the social developments that are going to follow it. Lots of DNA sequences are going to appear, and whoever owns them, it's unclear, and whoever is allowed to have access to them is unclear as well. But the sequences are going to be there first, and then, as usual, politics and social rules are going to be made up after these things are out there. So realize that this is going to happen, and it should really think about how this information is going to be used, since it's good and it's bad. So last round, who would sequence their DNA? Who would not sequence their DNA? All right, thank you.
Yes.